Hey guys, well after that game this morning, I thought that it would be interesting to take another look over at Jack Coombs and try to figure out what's going on with this guy. So let's go ahead and take a look actually here together while we're at it. I'll show you, as I usually do, how I go about looking at this stuff. We're not going to go as deep as we probably could, but we'll go kind of deep and see what's going on. So we're here with the 1908 Philadelphia Athletics, 68 and 85 and 4. They were sixth in the American League, a team that you probably would forget. Some of the players, of course, stand out to me because I'm playing through this. I mean, both of the Collins boys and Topsy Hartzell, of course, we know about. We've talked about him before. I know about Oldring, Murphy, and all these others. Most people probably don't know or don't really care. You know who Eddie Plank probably is. I know about Vickers, Dygert, and then this guy right here, Jack Coombs. He's the one who we're going to be looking at when you're talking about Shohei Ohtani and you're talking about these two-way players. This is a guy who had a lot of two-way potential, at least early on in his career. So we'll take a look at this and see. The interesting thing here, when you look through this, is you'll notice when you go down to his fielding record that he did not play in the outfield 1906 or 1907. It was 1908 where he had a bit of time playing in right field, also center field, a little bit of left, a little bit of first base, in addition to being a regular starting pitcher. So I haven't done a whole bunch of research. I've only taken a look. When you go click on the Sabre biography for him, scroll down a little bit. Of course, we need to make this a little bit bigger so you can sort of see what's going on. It says right here that after a strong start in 1907, Coombs again strained his arm and struggled to a 6-9 record for the second place Athletics. I'll pause for a second and say that, one of the hallmarks of historical baseball writing is that people always think that the one-loss record from the pitcher is associated with some sort of arm strain or problem if it's not so good, right? Sort of the sabermetric revolution has not yet reached into the way that we look at this type of baseball history. I think there are a lot of people who would actually argue with you that the pitcher back in those days, the starting pitcher, was much more important than they are today. The truth is that if the things we say about pitching today are true, then they're true for the entire history of the game. And we probably should be looking more at the fielding that the Athletics had than just the pitcher, especially if we see this big difference taking place. At any rate, Athletics outfielder Sock Seibold broke his leg in spring training the next year. We know about Seibold, prompting Connie Mack to insert the good hitting but still ailing Coombs in right field. I think that my database, the transaction list I have, does not have Seibold listed as being injured at the beginning of the season. But who knows? Again, I'm not the one who did the deep research into that particular transaction database. I know that there are mistakes in there. There might be one for fixing sometime in the future. Jack, who would bat .235 for his career, started the season like a house of fire, hitting over 300. Never mind sample size. But then when he slumped to .215, he found himself back on the bench, and they put Danny Murphy, the second baseman, into the outfield. Then he finally wound up pitching as well. Now, what we know, this is where I wanted to go, what we know, and I haven't even looked at this ahead of time, but what we know is that we can look here at his fielding and pitching logs from 1908 and sort of see how he was really used. So I'm using him mostly as a pitcher, right? You can see here, actually, in the beginning of the season that year, he was playing in the field. And let's see if we can figure out where he was playing. He started off the season actually in right field, which shows up down here. And then in May, he started to play a little bit of center field, a little bit of left. And it looks like it was sometime in May that they decided maybe to take away the starting job. He didn't start pitching, interestingly enough, where is it? Here it is, until June 11th. Right, so the way that we have him playing where he's pitching from the start of the season is actually not really that realistic. He didn't start pitching until around June 11th and then was pitching out of the bullpen at first. Didn't get his first chance to really start until June 26th. And then eventually he got into it and started throwing a whole bunch of complete games as everyone else did, and on and on and on. We look at his pitching log, it'll tell us the same thing. And it's a little bit of a surprise to me that they didn't use him a little bit more right from the start of the season. But that's the way that I will probably end up using him. It makes a little bit more sense to me. We look at his batting game log. This is useful because it will tell us what he is hitting. He actually started the season not at 300, but close to 430. And then he came back down to earth. And then when he was hitting .265, which is still really good for 1908, he found himself no longer starting and came back up for a while. And then this average started to dip until finally they said, well, you're hitting like a pitcher. Let's have you be a pitcher in the end. In the end of the season, he actually did quite well. He ended up getting his batting eye back and hit .256, only a .288 on base percentage, though, .356 slugging percentage. So this guy was not exactly like, it's not like you look at his card and think, oh man, this guy should be hitting third. What is this guy doing hitting ninth? He's not quite that good. Anyway, so this is sort of the way that it worked in real life. I would say that Connie Mack probably, if Connie Mack knew a little bit more about variance, he probably would not have been as excited about having Jack Coombs hitting, right? Because this doesn't look to me like Babe Ruth, right? This looks to me like you had a couple of good games, but this guy's not taking off the way that Ruth did. It'd be interesting to do sort of a similar comparison with Ruth and see what it would be like for him when we look at his batting log as a pitcher and see if you can sort of pinpoint why this guy ended up becoming a full-time batter instead of pitching for the rest of his career. Now, there is a really good philosophical question behind all of this, which is the other reason why I wanted to talk about this. You'll recall yesterday we talked about like realism and whether, we as the manager have anything to do with what happens, or are we just sitting back watching if we're trying to do things realistically. This is where this question comes up, because the problem that we have with Jack Coombs is that we could play it the way it was played exactly in real life. That's what happens if you have real life lineups turned on, right? You're forced to use him in this way. You can use him out of the bullpen early, right? Nobody's going to force you to have him not pitch until June 22nd, right? But there's really not... there's not that much of a benefit for you doing so, especially if you're doing a 1908 project, because there are a lot of complete games. You're not going to get like a whole ton of time and chances to use a mop-up pitcher or whatever, right? He was lifted for a mop-up reliever in the game that we just played, right? So because of this, you have a choice. You can choose to start him in the outfield, or you can choose to just have him be a pitcher and do whatever it is you like. Bill Staffen, making NP3 cards, calls him just an outfielder, which it does have some implications when you're trying to use him as a pitcher, which he clearly was used as in real life. The choice is really up to you, right? You can decide to put somebody else in the outfield, like Danny Murphy, like happened eventually in real life, or you can decide to, do basically whatever it is that you want. This is where the real question comes along, which is you as the player. What is it that you do? Do you want to look and see exactly how the player was used in real life and try to use him exactly the same way? Or do you give yourself a certain amount of latitude and say, hey, this guy could do this, he could do that, I'm going to play him the way that I want to play him, right? We could say the same thing about some of these guys who only had one appearance. I can't remember which game it was I was in, but the team that Husky Shaw played for, which slips my mind now, it was probably the Pirates, actually, probably a game that I videoed. They needed a third baseman, and it could have used a replacement, and I decided not to replace the third baseman because there was no actual third baseman on the bench. Husky Shaw was that guy. He was that first third baseman. I think it was the Pirates, actually. He was the third baseman on the team, but he had 0 third base appearances in 1908, 0 in his major league career, which consisted only of 1908. All he had was a pinch hitting appearance, right? But technically, theoretically, if you're going to be actually realistic here, you have to list this guy as playing third base, right? But this also means that when we have pitchers on the bench, especially in pre-World War I seasons, we have a lot of guys who could play in other positions, like Jack Coombs, who are not listed as being able to play in other positions according to, the lists that we have and all this other stuff. It becomes difficult because in many cases, a guy could do this, he could do that, but he didn't, right? That's part of the thing and the fascination that comes to me with doing this, right? Which is that when you really get into the history, you start realizing that, the sort of you play this role, you play that role type of segmentation that we have in baseball today, as well as in football, American football, and in other sports, didn't exist back then, right? It was a lot more flexible. There was a lot more of, we only have so many players, you have to play this role for us, and on and on. So love to know what you think about this. What is realistic in this sense? What is not realistic, right? Am I going to be condemned to hell for eternity for having Jack Coombs start as a pitcher? What do you think? Talk to you later. Talk to you more about this later. Bye.